Okay, so just a couple of quick things before I'm sorry, I don't allow any electronics in the class. If you'll need to put the laptop away. Okay, so a couple quick things about the homework before we get started here. So your first homework assignment is graded, right? Grades are posted, feedback is posted. By and large, you guys did pretty well for a first attempt at this. Okay, so there are just a couple of things I would like to quickly say that can help me better help you when you're having difficulty. Okay, so first thing I want to note, one, right? It is always better to turn in something than to turn in nothing, as long as that something isn't plagiarized, right? So I think, most of you got that, right? Most of you, even if you weren't quite sure what to do, did at least give me something, right? So that's good. Like, just make sure that you always are turning it in. And then, the purpose of the feedback is to help you understand how to do better, right? Secondly, right, the techniques required for the assignments are explained in the textbook, right? So if you look like for tonight's assignment and you see uncover assumptions and reading against the grain, right? If you don't know what that means, right, go back and look it up in the chapter, right? It will explain it to you there. And then if you don't understand what to do, then you've got a starting point for asking me questions about it, right? It's like, okay, I read this in the chapter. I don't really quite grasp what this is asking me to do. Can you help me, right? Because the general I don't understand question doesn't give me a starting point for you, right? It doesn't tell me what you don't understand. So it's just easier I can be more helpful to you if you give me something more specific, right? Other thing, right, is that in general, you can also refer back to your class notes to understand how to do the homework, right? We are practicing in class the things that I expect you to do on the homework assignments. So, for example, when we did that Jonathan Swift paragraph, right? What we were doing is looking for repetitions, looking for strands, looking for binaries. That is pretty much where you're going to be starting with every homework assignment, right? So if you can't figure out what else to do, at least start with that. And that then gives you a kind of a foundation to build on, right? The other thing I just want to make sure of, right? And this is, I don't mean this to sound condescending. This is going to sound a little weird. I've just never had this issue before. Everybody understands that the assignments at the end of the textbook are numbered, right? And that I don't expect you to do all of them, right? If I say, for example, assignment 3 on page 68, right? I only want you to do assignment, the one that is labeled number 3, right? That's it. That's all you got to do. So does anybody have any questions about this? Yeah, like I said, by and large, you guys actually did pretty well for your first homework assignment, right? Most of you did just fine. And, we'll get better at this as we get more practice, right? So for next time, you're reading chapter 4, and you're going to do, I know it says in the syllabus, do assignment 4 on page 115. That was my mistake. I must have had 4 on the brain because it's chapter 4. There is no assignment 4 on page 115. So you'll do assignment 2. It's the one that asks you to pick a magazine cover. Okay, so that is what you will do for Thursday, right? And for tonight, you are doing the assignment on that article from the New Statesman that I sent to all of you. And you're going to be uncovering assumptions and reading against the grain. Now, we've actually already done a little bit of this. We did some of this last time. When we talk about reading against the grain, what we mean is looking for things that the piece is saying that it doesn't seem to be aware that it's saying, right? Or that maybe it doesn't mean to be saying. So, for example, when we looked at that Adam Ruins Everything piece last time on the Electoral College, right? What did it seem to be saying? What were the things it seemed to be saying unintentionally? Does anybody remember? Does anybody remember anything in particular about the gender dynamics, the generational dynamics?
Yeah, the old lady and the young man was always correcting the old lady.
Yeah. When we looked at, the young man correcting the old woman. Right, the constant actually, right? We noted that this came off as kind of insensitive and mansplaining, right? Like, a man constantly telling a woman how dumb she is, right? Now, this is probably not something that the piece intended as part of its message, right? That doesn't mean that it isn't there or that it isn't valid or that we shouldn't point it out, right? So this is what we mean by reading against the grain, right? Looking for these kinds of things that the piece is saying but may not realize that it's saying, right? So this is a kind of implication, right? Implications, remember, are these. What's the difference between something that is implied and something that's explicit? Anybody remember? Yeah, something that is implied is merely suggested, right? Something that is explicit is something that is clearly stated. So let's kind of go back to where we got to last time with that Adam Ruins Everything video. Can somebody remind me what we already had in terms of repetitions, in terms of strands, in terms of binaries? And we'll just put repetitions and strands together because they're pretty similar in a video presentation. So we've already noted, right, the actually repetition and that kind of strand of correction. What else did we have?
Electoral college.
Okay, yeah, electoral college, right? Electoral college is all over the damn place, right?
States.
Okay, a lot of, talk about states. Maps. And we noticed as well that the maps are usually used for comparative purposes, right? He'll give us a map of Wyoming and then a map of California. He'll give us a map of what we think voting patterns look like and then what they actually look like, right? So yeah, he always seems to use the maps for comparison. Good, what else?
Votes.
Okay, votes and voters, right? Did we locate any other repetitions or strands?
Power.
Okay, power. Yeah, good. Yeah, there was a lot in there about power. And who has it and who doesn't. What about binaries? What binaries do we locate?
Republican, Democrat.
Okay, yeah, Republican, Democrat, right?
Man,
Man, woman,
old and young.
old and young. Yep. Now, does the Republican-Democrat binary actually end up being important at all?
No.
Yeah, essentially what he does is demonstrate how the system actually hurts both parties, right? So what he does with it is maybe a little bit surprising, but it's essentially like it demonstrates that at least in this case, both parties are on more or less equal footing or more or less the same, right? So the binary gets busted. So man, woman, old, young, what else?
Knowledge, ignorance.
Knowledge, ignorance, good. Yeah.
Rich and middle class. That was kind of implied because of the visuals on that video.
Okay.
Everyone that he spoke about, as far as the Republican side, seemed to be a little more well off, whereas the Democrats were the blue collar and middle class people.
Okay, yeah, right. There was the dude with the surfboard, right?
Right.
Was wearing a suit with no necktie, and he had a lot of gold chains and stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, and the Democrat was kind of dressed a little bit more simply and wearing a cowboy hat and that sort of thing, right? Although did that guy necessarily look like a stereotype for a Democrat? In part because like one of the things he's trying to do is defy the stereotype, right? He's showing you it's like, okay, there are actually a lot of Democrats in Texas and a lot of Republicans in California, but in statewide elections, if they vote for the losing candidate, their votes don't count, right? But there is, this kind of dynamic, this kind of binary between the powerful and the people, right? Oops. Damn it. Stay. So, maybe a binary between like elites and ordinary people. All right, we go Ms. Rich Cousin.
Elites in common.
And also, what's another implied binary, right? What's the basic argument about the electoral college that's being made?
Right and wrong.
Okay, right and wrong, or fair and unfair, right? So from this, we can try to pull out certain unstated premises, right? So this is what we talk about uncovering assumptions. So we usually use the word assumption, like assume or assumption negatively, right? When you assume, you make an ass out of you and me, right? What we mean by assumptions in this case, right, we're talking about things that the piece basically takes for granted as true and doesn't feel like it needs to explain, right? So these are the kind of invisible premises underlying the whole argument, right? So if the piece is arguing that the Electoral College is unfair, then what must it be assuming about voting or about elections? What's unfair about the Electoral College?
That the Electoral College basically does away with popular voting.
Okay, yeah, that it makes the popular vote meaningless, right?
Right.
So that's an assumption there, right? One, right, the popular vote should be meaningful. Right, you can rephrase this different ways, that the choice of the people should be respected, that sort of thing, right? But yeah, the basic idea here, right, is the basic problem he has with the Electoral College is that, it makes the popular vote irrelevant, right? Are there other assumptions about voters or voting? Like, for example, if we think about this dynamic in between states, or we look at like Wyoming versus California, right? The way he presents that. So we've got that small states versus big states binary. So what's the discrepancy in power between Wyoming and California?
In the state, it doesn't matter about how many Something having to do with how many votes they get. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I forgot what he said exactly. He was saying like, even though California is a big state, doesn't mean that they're going to necessarily get the most votes.
Yeah, or at least the individual voters are less powerful in California because it's a big state, right? So we took the most populous state, California, and the least populous state, Wyoming, and he compared how many people it takes to get one electoral vote in each state, right? And people in Wyoming have way more power relative to their number of electoral votes than people in California, right? Simply because nobody fucking lives there. So, what assumption is the piece then making about how votes should be weighted?
How big your state
It shouldn't matter how big your state is, right? In fact, does it seem to think we should even be voting by state at all? Yeah, every vote should be weighted equally, right? So that seems to be another assumption here underlying all of this. And there are also some assumptions, so these are the big assumptions in terms of content, right? Now what about in terms of style here? The way it's presented. Let's think about this man, woman, old, young, knowledge, ignorance binary again here, right? Who does the piece seem to assume is holding back reform of this system? Yeah, the older people are the ones holding back reform, right? And why are they holding back reform?
Because they're stuck in the code.
Just don't like change.
Okay, maybe they just don't. Well, what's the specific problem that the woman in the video has in regards to the system? Is it that she dislikes change or that she's afraid of change? What's her relationship to this, or what's her level of knowledge about the system?
She didn't have a lot of knowledge.
That it's a good system.
That she doesn't know very much about it. She doesn't understand it very well, right?
Right.
So the assumption here, right, that's underlying that is that old people are holding back reform because they don't understand the system. And two corollaries to this, right? One, if people knew how the system worked, they'd want to change it. And second, and in addition to that, that younger people understand the system better than older people. So you can see how we can tie all of these unstated premises back to this observation work that we did in the first stage, right? In particular, by looking at the way it sets up binaries, right? Electoral vote, popular vote. Big states, small states. So, old, young, man, woman, right? So, one of the things you're going to want to pay very close attention to as you're trying to pull these kinds of things out is the binaries the piece sets up and what they imply, right? So I think it would probably be good for us to do a little bit more practice with this so you are better prepared to do this for the assignment that's due tonight. So I'm going to show you 2 short videos. They're ads for the same company, but they are from different eras. Right? One of them is from the late 80s, and one of them is from from about 11 years ago. And I want you to first, once again, just pay attention to the usual things, right? Pay attention to repetition, strands. We'll put those together. Binaries. And also look and see if there are any anomalies here, right? Things that don't seem to fit with the rest of the video, right? And I'm going to warn you before I put this on, this first one is pretty damn savvy. So just be ready and have an insulin shot handy.
Today we'll be reading chapters 3, 4. You can never win her over. Let's do this. I'll do it. Capture, have no pet. Forget the excuses, there's no way to reach her. No more flew out the bus window. I didn't do it. Our only break was a substitute teacher. Mrs. Hatcher's absent, there will be no test. When things got rough, I'll never forget it. She made us stick to it. She poured. I got it. I knew you could do it. This was DLT, Fred, and Coco from your 3rd grade. Hard knock, Mrs. Hatcher. We've been here since we met you. And what we wanted to say is we'll never forget you.
Okay. So, if we haven't all gotten diabetes from the sweetness of that, what did you notice? Where do we see repetitions and strands, first off? What's that? Okay, repetition of Mrs. Hatcher, right? And are there other words they attach to this character that repeats throughout? And I know this was only a minute long, but what do they keep calling Mrs. Hatcher?
Can you replay and turn it up for us a little bit, please?
I guess I can.
Hard-nosed Mrs. Hatcher, tough as you can get. Today we'll be reading chapters 3, 4. You can never win her over. Let's do this. I'll do it. Mrs. Hatcher had no pet. Forget the excuses, there's no way to reach her. No more flew out the bus window. I didn't do it. Our only break was a substitute teacher. Mrs. Hatcher's absent, there will be no test. When things got rough, I'll never forget it. She made us stick to it. She poured. I got it. I knew you could do it. This was DLT, Fred, and Coco from your 3rd grade. Hard knock, Mrs. Hatcher. We've been here since we met you. And what we wanted to say is we'll never forget you.
Hard nose is the name they keep attaching to her, right? Okay. What does that mean? What does hard nose mean? Can we figure that out even from context if we're not familiar with the term?
She's very firm and what she's hard on them so they can do better, I guess.
Yeah, there is a kind of theme of tough love that runs through the whole thing, right? So we can actually, we've already kind of uncovered an assumption there, right? About the way whoever wrote this ad wants you to think about teaching, right? Right, that good teachers, or the kinds of, or memorable teachers at least, are tough, right? Anything else you see that kind of repeats or seems to be related? Let's, if we look at, say, okay, no's, nevers. You can never win her over. She has no pets, right? There's no way to reach her. Forget the excuses, right? What else? Anything else you notice that repeats? So we're talking a lot about language. Do you notice any imagery that repeats? What's that? Okay. Teacher frowning. What about the students? What do you notice about the students?
They were upset and then they were happy.
Okay, yeah, so there's a sad, happy binary there, right? Right, they go from sad to happy, right, once they understand what's going on here, right? And indeed, teacher-student seems to be a kind of binary, right, that then gets collapsed by the end of the ad, right? That the teacher and the students are not really so different from each other. Anything else you notice about the students? How diverse is this classroom?
Wasn't real diverse.
Yeah, that's a kind of mild way of putting it, right?
I saw one black student.
There is one black kid, yes. They make sure you see him. But yeah, there's only one black student. The class is mostly made up of little white kids, right? What about in terms of setting? Where does most of this take place?
Dark, dreary classroom.
Okay, it's a classroom. It's a little bit dimly lit, right? Does the classroom look a little old-fashioned?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's right. It kind of like looks like, you know, this ad was made in 1988, but the classroom still kind of looks like it's from the 50s or 60s, right?
It's like a classroom from the Christmas store.
Yeah, and I think there are reasons for that we'll talk about here. Yeah, but yeah, there's an old-fashioned classroom. And that's where we spend most of the ad, right? Except for the last few seconds of it. And then where does it transport us to?
Brightly lit McDonald's.
A brightly lit McDonald's, yeah. So yeah, there's a contrast there between dimly lit or old-fashioned and brightly lit and modern, right? Now, given what McDonald's sells, what would you expect to see featured more prominently in the ad than it is?
Food.
Yeah, how prominent is food in the ad?
I mean, not really into the end.
You see it to the end.
Yeah, they bring out a burger and fries and a Coke at the end, right? We can put that under anomalies too, right? That this, you would expect, like, okay, this is what they're selling, this is what they want you to see, right? But they don't feature it, right? The food is only at the end, right? Now, can we relate this to an assumption they might be making about their audience or about their product? Why might they not feel why might a company like McDonald's not feel the need to feature a burger and fries prominently in an ad? What's that?
They're trying to show something else.
Yeah, they're trying to use something other than food to draw you in, right? Why else might they not bother to show the burger and fries that prominently? Has anybody in the United States not heard of McDonald's? Does anybody not know what they sell? Everybody knows it's a burger and fries joint, right? So one of these, yeah, go ahead, Eric.
Another binary that I saw was during the classroom scenes, everything was kind of droll and depressing. But
Okay.
now that they get into the McDonald's at the end, everybody's happy and smiling.
Yeah, that's where everybody's happy. Yeah. They're not happy in school, even as their relationship with the teacher improves, right? But they're happy once they get to McDonald's. But yeah, to get back to sort of where we were with this thing about the food, right? The assumption here that's underlying this is that everyone already knows they can get a burger and fries at McDonald's. There's no reason to sell the burger, because there's no reason to increase awareness of the product, right? They don't need to. Now, we can also think about this, if we look at the way this is set up, let's think about things that it might be suggesting without meaning to. Let's try a little bit of reading against the grain here. What do you think, for example, they're trying to say by including a black student in the class? Pardon?
They're not like, they're not prejudiced towards other.
Yeah, the intent seems to be, it's like, okay, we've got this almost entirely white classroom, but there is one black kid, so we are a forward-thinking corporation that is devoted to diversity and inclusion, right? So that might be the intent. But the fact that there's only one black student kind of undermines that, right? So what it actually ends up looking like is more like what we call tokenism, right? Right. It's not intentionally racist, but it ends up looking kind of racist. So who do we think this ad is aimed at, based on everything we've got up here?
Okay.
Well, let me ask you this. So the ad mostly features children, right? There are little kids singing, little kids enjoying a heartwarming McDonald's lunch with their teacher after a long year of struggle, right? Are little kids' hearts warmed by stories of teachers from their pasts? And do little kids typically have their own spending money? Now, they might bug mom and dad, right? Take me to McDonald's, take me to McDonald's, take me to McDonald's. But does this ad look like it's meant to appeal to a little kid who is going through a tough third grade class? Who's it actually trying to hit?
The parent?
Yeah, it's trying to hit their parents, right? And not through selling them a burger, but by selling them the warm, rosy glow of nostalgia, right? You remember what school was like, right? You remember that teacher who meant a lot to you when you were a little kid, who pushed you to do your best when you didn't want to, right? You think little kids are adorable. So pack up the minivan and come on down. And given the ethnic makeup of the class and sort of the structure of the classroom, in addition to where most McDonald's were placed in the country at the time, do we think this is probably an urban, a rural, or a suburban setting?
Suburban.
Yeah, this is 100% suburbs, right? Even, the time period, 1988 is right for that, right? Peak American suburbia. So yeah, this ad is aimed squarely at white suburban parents of young children, right? Now I'm going to show you a second ad from 2009. And I want to do the same kind of work with this. And in particular, I want you to focus on what's different.
Ladies and gentlemen, introducing an indulgent interlude, a melodic mocha melody, blended like chocolate and coffee. You're gonna want to sip this through a straw. This isn't a kiddie sweet fix. It's a sophisticated stirring that'll warm your soul and tingle your toes, whipping emotions like cream. Here, for the first time, drizzling chocolate in your ear, ready to hit your sweet spot is Dwelly.
Sometimes you need a kiss in the middle of the day, baby. The sweet kiss that ever come no way besides me. You gotta love, love with me, cat baby. A new sensation. Ooh, touch of sweetness just like the cream. You know what I mean? I love how you blend when you blend to overtake me. I want you to experience the new sensation with the flavor today. A new vibration, like McDonald's, they can't pay. I'm here anytime, day. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay, so what do we notice in this one? What's different here?
All black cast.
Yeah,
Club.
the cast here is mostly black and Latino, right? So yeah,
Kind of urban jazz club or something.
yes,
And it's using R&B music to sell the product.
yeah. The music is much improved, right? Right, urban jazz club. We have a racially mixed cast. R&B music. Right, it still works in the McDonald's jingle, but it kind of riffs on it, right? And it's much more musically complex than the very simple melody in the earlier ad. What else do we notice about the people in this ad?
They're in a better mood.
What, pardon?
Better mood.
Yeah, they're happy throughout, right?
They're all adults.
And they are all adults, yeah. Do we see a single child in this video?
They're all situated in couples.
Yeah, most of them are situated in couples, and even those that aren't look like they're kind of looking around to find somebody, right? But these are probably couples that don't have kids yet, right? In fact, the MC says at the beginning of the ad, right, this isn't some kiddie sweet fix. So what are they assuming about McDonald's image in excluding children and in specifically saying there's no kiddie sweet fix here?
More adult image.
They're going for a more adult image, right? So what are they assuming about the image they already have?
It's too kiddie.
Yeah, they're assuming that what people think of McDonald's is little kids running around screaming and puking on the playland, right? So yeah, that's assumption one that they're trying to push against, right? Is that people think McDonald's is for kids. We could also, as a sort of corollary to that, right? Does this look like any McDonald's you have ever been in?
No.
It does not, right? So they are also assuming that people think McDonald's is suburban and kind of plastic, right? And I mean that literally, right? The tables and the seats are usually made out of plastic. Now, where was I going with this? What about the product that's being sold here? Okay, yes, it's McCafe, right? You can't just call it coffee, it's got to be Mc something, right? So McCafe, what does the name McCafe suggest?
It's the McDonald's coffee.
Pardon?
It's the McDonald's coffee.
Okay, yeah, the Mick is the branding part, right? And do we usually use the word cafe when we refer to coffee itself?
No.
What are we talking about when we say cafe? Yeah, exactly. We're talking about a coffee house, right? Or a little, or like a cool little restaurant, right? So yeah. So the idea here is for the name to connote a coffee house, right? But one that has this unfortunate little Mick attached to it, right? And I think we can do some reading against the grain there, right? When we refer to something as a Mick something, do we usually mean that in a positive sense? Like if I'm going to work at my Mick job, do we usually mean anything good or positive by that? Yeah, we usually mean something that is kind of like, low wage and low skilled, right? And just repetitive, right? So one thing they don't reckon with is negative associations with the Mick prefix. There was something else that I wanted to look at here, and I'm having trouble remembering now what it was. Shit. Okay. Okay, so where is the product? So the product is this coffee, this McCafe, right? I knew I was going somewhere with this. How does the way the product is featured differ in this ad from the first ad?
It was shown throughout the whole ad.
Yeah, it's in every shot, right? And
He keeps describing it.
yeah, the MC describes it.
It was center of attention.
Yeah, and the singer
He's singing about it.
even refers to it in the lyrics, right? All the lyrics are about this coffee. So why do you think they are featuring this product in every shot when they didn't feature the burger and fries hardly at all in the earlier ad?
It's a new
At that
product.
time, that was a new product.
Yeah, exactly, because they're thinking this is something people don't associate with McDonald's, right? Right. People don't associate McDonald's with fancy coffee drinks. So the basic purpose of the ad seems to be about awareness, right? Now, might the nature of the product also have something to do with the reason there are no little kids? Yeah, what happens to little kids when you give them coffee?
And they bounce.
Yeah. Right? Yeah, they bounce off the floors, they bounce off the walls, right? They bounce everywhere, right? And then they pass out, but not soon enough. So they're selling a product intended for adults, so no children. And they're also they seem to be vaguely aware, at least, that most people regard McDonald's as uncool. And so they are trying to put a veneer of coolness over what it is they do and what it is they sell, right? And one thing that I do want you guys to get from watching both of these ads, right, is either of these ads necessarily selling, well, they are selling a product, right? But are they selling you a product by shoving a product in your face and saying, buy this? Or are they trying to sell a particular kind of feeling or idea?
Trying to make you associate certain.
Yeah, they want you to associate particular feelings or particular memories with the product, right? So basically, most advertising works through metaphor. And one of the reasons why I'm going over this, right, is because it actually, like, the more we go through this, the more we pick these kinds of things apart, the better your bullshit detectors will be, right? The better you will be able to tell when you are being manipulated by advertising or by political rhetoric. Right, so we can see that the first ad was trying to tug on our heartstrings and make us remember those special teachers in our childhood. And the second ad is trying to make us feel like we want to be a part of something cool, right? So what do we mean when we talk about metaphor? What is a metaphor?
Certain things that you can use to describe another thing without actually mentioning it.
Yeah, so a metaphor is it's a comparison or an analogy, right? And a metaphor is an implied analogy. Right? Its close cousin, the simile, is an explicit analogy, yes. So a simile would be something like this, right? Frank is like, right, or Frank is like a pig, right? So I'm drawing an explicit comparison between Frank and a pig, right? So a simile usually tries to draw attention to some particular characteristic, right? A metaphor tends to be a little bit more open-ended. So, when I say Frank is like a pig, that immediately begs the question, well, how is Frank like a pig, right? A metaphor identifies Frank more closely with the comparative term. So if I say Frank is a pig, right? We think about then the range of associative terms that we think of when we hear the word pig, or when we see the word pig in print, right? So what are the connotations we attach to the word pig? What ideas do we associate with the word pig?
Dirty.
Dirty, which is actually very unfair to pigs who are actually very clean animals. They roll in mud because they don't have sweat glands. What else? What other ideas do we associate with pigs?
Fat.
Eat a lot.
Okay, yeah. Overweight, gluttonous, okay? What else? Okay, lazy.
Like someone being a pig, like being rude or nasty.
Yeah, rude or nasty or sleazy, right? So if we, if we're talking about, say, like Frank's conduct with women, and we say Frank is a pig, right? We usually mean like that he's sleazy or he's a chauvinist, right? So yeah, sleazy, rude. Yeah, we usually don't mean anything good by this, right? But the point is, yeah, that we tend to then associate the full range of connotations here with Frank, right? So a metaphor has two basic parts. Sometimes one or both of these parts are implied, right? So the subject of the metaphor, in this case Frank, we call the tenor. The comparative term, in this case pig, we call the vehicle. So think of the vehicle as the thing that carries the comparison, right? The thing that moves the comparison. So I'd like to do a little bit of practice unpacking some of these, because this is actually kind of a good way, like looking at metaphors and taking metaphors apart is a good way to practice pulling implications out of things. So if we go to the textbook and turn to where? I know I marked this, but where? Okay, page 81. We have the try this exercise. It's uncovering the logic of figurative language. So what I would like to do with a couple of these statements is identify the tenor, identify the vehicle, and then think about how the comparison works, right? What's the logic behind it? So let's look at that first one. It's probably the easiest of them. It's a Vincent van Gogh quote. It says, "Conscience is a man's compass." What's the tenor and what's the vehicle? What's the subject and what's the comparative term? Yes, conscience is the tenor. Good. Yes, it's being compared to a compass. And how are these two alike? What's the logic of this comparison? How is conscience like a compass?
But it's all over the place and it guides you.
Okay, yeah, you can use it to guide you, right? And I think we might also want to think about how a compass guides you, right? What does a compass actually do?
It's always pointing north.
It always points north, right? So does it tell you specifically where to go? It just gives you it gives you a standard to follow, right? It's going to point north, and you can find your way from there, right?
Conscious is supposed to be the same way.
Yeah. Yeah. The compass will always point you true north. Your conscience will always give you a standard of behavior to which you should adhere, right? It won't tell you necessarily what to do, but it will help you navigate what to do, right? Or where to go. Okay. This one's a little bit more complicated. It's actually there are two levels, right? There's an explicit metaphor here, and there's another one implied underneath it. So all religions, arts, and sciences are branches of the same tree. What's the tenor here?
Religions, arts, and sciences.
Okay, yep, religions, arts, and sciences. And what's the vehicle? Is a tree. Think about this. Branches, yeah. Religions, arts, and sciences are like branches. So that brings us to the underlying metaphor, right? Where one term is implied. So what is tree the vehicle for? If we think about religions, arts, and sciences, what do they all have in common? What are they? So they're all branches of the same tree, right? They're all coming off of the same trunk. So what then does that trunk represent? What does that tree represent? You're on the right track there.
Religious subjects.
Well, religions, arts, and sciences are treated as separate things here, right? But they're all branches off the same tree, off the same trunk.
Oh. Beliefs.
Well, that really only applies to one of them, right?
Ways that we express ideas.
You're on the right track here, right? I mean, what is he thinking them as branches of? Yeah, Martha.
They're the main, like if you want to answer a question, like those would be where you come.
Yeah, yeah. Here, well, like we're kind of dancing around the word, but we've got the right idea, right? What's that? Think about something that is less open to argument than values, right? Okay, you have facts, knowledge, right? Knowledge is the tenor here. Yeah, these are all branches of study, right? You have fields of study, branches of knowledge, right? So knowledge is the tree, and religions, arts, and sciences are the branches. Right? That's how the metaphor works, right? Okay, let's do one last one here. This one is also a little bit complicated because the main tenor and vehicle also are not clearly stated. So think about what kind of thing is implied in this statement, right? All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances. So if all the world is a stage, and men and women are players with entrances and exits, what kind of thing is being described here? Are you saying that life is the tenor or the vehicle? Well, think about this again. Like, where do we see a stage and players? In what kind of field of endeavor? What's that?
Theater.
Yeah, in a play, right? So the tenor here, or the vehicle here, is a play. And what is being compared to a play? Think of it in terms of these entrances and exits, right?
He says the players in a play will be like characters, different characters of the play.
Mm-hmm.
Life and death.
Yeah, the tenor is life, right? Essentially what he's saying here is that life is like a play. Right? Everybody has their entrance. They wander around on the stage a little bit, and then they exit. All right, so we're going to stop there. I do want to ask before I let you guys go and we start cleaning up. I'm going to let you go a little bit early because we actually have done a lot today. Does anybody have any questions about what we did or about the homework? Okay, so everybody understands, right? You're doing assignment 3 on page 68, just assignment 3, right? And if you do have questions, you know what to do, right? Go back to the textbook first and check your class notes and see what it is specifically that's hanging you up, and then shoot me an email and I will help you if I can. Okay? All right, so let's start cleaning our desk. So Eric, if you can come on up and get the rag. Okay, dog rates. Kyle coming up.